discuss a lot about the beneficence, about non-malfeasance, and so on. So this is an important topic, and I think it's still quite neglected topic in our country. So we are lucky today. We'll have two experts who will discuss about this topic, and we hope for a very fruitful discussion after that. Prof. Zabidi Hussein will discuss about the case about these problems, and then I think Dr. Teguh will explain more from the ethical point of view of these situations. So first of all, I'd like to invite our first speaker, Professor Zabidi Hussein. I know a lot of you already know him. So he has a long CV. I don't have time to read all of them. So he's the Pro Vice Chancellor and Professor of Pediatrics, International Medical University in Malaysia. And also he is a member and chairman of many other organizations. I will not mention one by one, but I think what is relevant with today's meeting is that he is a chairman of Ethical Code of Conduct for Children. And he has a lot of publications. 9 of them are about ethics, so publication on ethical issues. And also he's now holding some positions related to ethics. And he's previously a member of Expert Ethics Panel European Research Commission's Brussels 2014, and also Treasury of Bioethics Education Network of Malaysia, and many other things that I think very relevant to our discussions today. So first of all, we'll listen to his presentation. Then after that, we will listen to Dr. Teguh, and after that, we'll have a discussion. So let's do the discussion at the end after both speakers do the speak. Like already mentioned, Prof. Zabidi, so around 30 minutes. Of course, feel free if you think you need more, but yeah, around 30 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I will share my screen now. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. This is in a way I'm going to present this for various reasons. One is I'm going to tell you the story of what happened. But more importantly, I'm going to seek forgiveness from God for the various lies that I had to go through. In the process of trying to get the treatment for these children, I had to lie. And I think lying is so unethical, but I had to. I will tell you the story later on. And so this is really a true story. This has been published as a Perilous Genes. You can see this family here with 5 children, and what happened was there was an unfulfilled promise. One day, as the eldest child reached the age of 9, my mother promised her that she will bring her from a remote place in Kelantan to a city in Kuala Lumpur by air, and at that time there was no Air Asia and so on. It was way back in 1992, 93, I think. There was no Air Asia then. So this girl, Maslina, was very excited, very, very excited on the prospect of going to KL on the plane. And the promise was if she gets number 1, number 2, or number 3 in her exam, you see. So that was a promise being given, but the promise was not fulfilled, because the mother said that at the time when the school had finished, it was the monsoon season in Kelantan at that time, and the mother was expecting another baby. So the mother said to Maslina that, sorry, I'm not going to be able to take you yet to Kuala Lumpur. And Maslina accepted that. She accepted that. But about 10 days later, the teachers noticed that her behavior changed from being a very, very happy child. She started to go into the class and shouting in the class for no reason. She started to hide under the table and so on. So clearly, the parents linked that the teachers linked that to the unfulfilled promise. Okay, so that was the issue. So she acted strangely and so on. And at that time she was 9 years old, and she was sent to a psychiatrist for 1 year. under psychiatrist for 1 year. And then the psychiatrist started to treat her. But suddenly, as the second child reached the age of 9, her brother started to behave strangely as well. Now, it's easier for me to pick up a neurological problem because the manifestation of the brother's illness was more physical. He had tremor when he was writing. His gait suddenly became unsteady. So it was easy for me to pick up a neurological problem. And to cut a long story short, we did a CT scan on the brother. And to our horror, there was a complete absence of the white matter. Now, Dr. Goh will talk to you again about will remind us again about this issue, the gray and white matter. But there was no white matter at all in the brain. So we were puzzled. So why this happened? So as we were trying to look for explanation to this, we discovered that there is a disease which happens in 1 in every 4 children. It is called metachromatic leukodystrophy, where the white matter suddenly dies after a certain age. This is a juvenile onset, meaning to say that the child was born normal, but as the child grows and reaches the age of 9, the white matter begins to degenerate because the bone marrow is not able to supply the white matter to the brain. So basically, we had to search high and low of how to give treatment for this, and so on. So as we were looking for ways of treatment, the third child also had the same thing. So there was a race to save the number 4 and number 5. And it is this race to save number 1 and 4 and number 5 that I had to resort to unconventional things. I had to involve somebody from a foreign country. I had to lie to that person to come to Malaysia to be my external examiner because I want that person, the person to take the specimens to his home country. Okay, and that was a lie, basically. So I called the external examiner for that reason, and I brought the external examiner to see this family. And I said to that external examiner, I said, look at this family. I fear that here we already have number 1, number 2, number 3 affected. I can't bear the thought of number 4 and number 5 also had the same thing. So he refused to send the specimens to confirm the specimens in the home country. But along the way, while we were driving home from the home of the family, I stopped him at the car park, and he was going to the hotel, and he said to me, "Look, Zeb, I think I'll take it. Okay, and I will risk the issues with the custom." So that was something totally unexpected. I did not expect him to agree to taking the specimens to the lab where the specimens will be confirmed. So he took the specimens, and to our horror, not only 1, 2, 3 were affected, number 4 and number 5 were affected as well. So all of them had the same disease of metachromatic leukodystrophy. So that was one issue. So we really felt that we wanted to help this family. I don't know how to do it. Then the second point here, the custom saga. Again, I was really, we really have to confirm this disease again. And then this was my second lying that I had to do. I brought the specimens, and I reached the airport in that country, and the customs were sensing that I had brought something with me, searched my bag, searched high and low for my bag, and thought that I was hiding something. So in the end, he could not find what I had hidden, and he asked me to pack the bags again. But he said to me that, "I think you have brought something illegal. We don't know what it is. But what do you do?" I said, I'm a doctor. "And where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to see somebody in your country." So he let me off, and then he said to me that he found a toiletry bag in my bag, and he said, "What's in it?" And I said, "Yeah, it says my toiletry bag. Do you want me to open it, sir?" He said, "No, no, no. If it's toiletry bag, don't open it." So the specimens that I brought was in that toiletry bag. I had to lie. Okay. So the specimens were confirmed again in that country, and again confirmed that all the children had the same disease. So our task now was to find a way to treat this, because we cannot bear the thought of all the 5, because they'll be watching their brothers and sisters dying from this disease. In fact, the eldest sister died when she was 17. The youngest brother died when he was 15. So the thought of the other 2 normal children watching the death, and without us doing anything, was too much for me, So then something else happened, and this story is full of unexpected things, Unexpected things happen. I was invited to join a neurology conference in Chiang Mai. Then I realized that there was someone from Minnesota who was doing match unrelated. He was doing a bone marrow transplant for metachromatic leukodystrophy. So I immediately rushed home. I didn't go to my house. I went to my office straight away, called the parents and said that, well, look, we have found a cure, a potential cure for this disease. So the race for the cure then happened. We started to collect donation, a lot of donation that came in because the public seems to know about this case. And here again, there is an ethics of crowdfunding that we had to go through, because at one stage, the one of the neurologists in the country, the chief neurologist in the country came to know about my crowdfunding, and he stopped me from doing it. I made an appeal, but my appeal was rejected. The reason why he stopped me from doing it was that the bone marrow transplant was an experimental treatment. It was totally experimental, and there's no proof that it worked. So doing crowdfunding for an experimental therapy is out of the question, he said. So I made an appeal, but my appeal was rejected. But so again, we were devastated. By that time, number 4 was almost exhibiting the same symptoms, and we had to do something very, very fast. And something else happened to me. I was invited to travel to America to follow a delegation of high powered people to visit America. I went to America, but the magic things did not happen when I was in America. The magic thing happens when I was on my way home on transit from America to Kuala Lumpur. And what was the magic thing? I met the chief secretary of the Ministry of Health, who was asking me about what I was doing, and I told him the story. And he sounded very, very interested. And he said to me that, what do the parents do? And I told that the father is an army officer and the mother is a nurse. And quickly he told me that if the parents are working with the government, the law says that you have to find treatment wherever the treatment is available. And I said to him, including an experimental treatment, he said, wherever the treatment is available, you can send them to wherever there is availability of the treatment. So I was very, very happy with that. And we started to work again, crowdfunding again. And then something else happened. We eventually found out that it needs a 6/6 HLA matching for the donor to transfer the bone marrow to the recipient. But despite all tests, we discovered that the best match was a 4 out of 6. Only 4 elements of the HLA were matched, and we could not find 6/6. So it is a very risky experimental treatment. So we found we tried the Adelaide Bank, we tried the Sydney Bank, no match. We tried New York Bank, also no match. So there was a black donor from New York, and that donor was found by the partner I was working with, called Professor William Crivet. He was working in Minnesota at that time. We kept communicating. He said that the best match I could find was a 4 out of 6 match. Do you still want to send your kids here to me? I can risk them and still transfer the donor to the recipient. So we were stuck. Shall we do it? Shall we go on 4 out of 6? Or do we need 6 out of 6? We make a big decision. We make a big decision of saying, okay, we'll do it, even if it is 4 out of 6. Okay. Then another problem happened. Professor William Crivet in Minnesota said to me, I really must confirm that these kids have MLD, and that confirmation, the lab confirmation, must be done in our lab in Minnesota. And the specimens have to reach Minnesota within 18 hours. I was devastated. I was devastated because how can you send specimen from Kelantan all the way to Kuala Lumpur, all the way to New York, all the way to Minnesota, and hoping that the specimen will reach within 18 hours? So we told the parents obviously wept and broke down and so on. And that was it. Despite all the crowdfunding that we did, there was no way we can go ahead with this match unrelated bone marrow transplant. Another magic happens to me at that time. I was in my clinic the next day, and I heard, I received a long distance phone call from somebody. And that somebody told me that I heard you have been trying to help this family to have a bone marrow transplant in Minnesota. And I said, how did you know about it? And he said, I was reading in the newspapers. He said, how can I help you? And I was saying, I don't know how you can help me, but who are you anyway? He said, I'm such and such. I work in the Malaysian embassy in Washington. And I said, I don't know how you can help me, but it is impossible for me to bring the specimens from Kelantan to Minnesota within 18 hours. Another magic happens to me. He said to me, consider it done. Consider it done. So there was an abuse really here, the abuse of diplomatic pouch. He sent the specimen through a diplomatic pouch. The delays in specimens transfer normally happens because the custom will check it and so on. But when you put the specimen in diplomatic pouch, nobody touches it, all right? So next day, he called me. He said, yes, the specimens have arrived in Washington. I will send them to Minnesota, and it should arrive in time. So there we are. A lot of lies, a lot of not speaking the truth and so on. But my main aim, God, is to help this family. Okay, so then the specimens arrived, and I got confirmation from Professor William Crivet that there was a 4 out of 6 match. Come immediately. So we flew the family to Minnesota. There was another magic that happens. We flew the family, I think around November. It was winter in Minnesota at the time. But in February of the same year, I was invited to go to Texas Baylor College of Medicine to do some neurology training. And on the day the family arrived in Minnesota, I was able to hand over the family to Professor William Crivet, and he did the transplant. Sadly, the transplant was done in the winter, and the 4th child passed away because not from metachromatic leukodystrophy, but he passed away from aspergillosis. So imagine the pressure on me, when we had to send these people to the families to Minnesota, and then one passed away, and people will have thought that the bone marrow wasn't successful. Okay, so I can give you some pictures now. The youngest child is currently 31 years old. She gave full permission to me to present this case to you today. She gave her full consent and her family's consent to present to me today. She has diabetes mellitus, she's on treatment. She has chronic lung disease, already also on treatment. She has growth hormone deficiency. These are all complications of bone marrow transplant. Growth hormone deficiency on treatment. She has bilateral cataract, she's on treatment. She's short stature, on treatment. But there's nothing much you can do there. She has severe sensory hearing loss, she's on treatment. And she was suspected to have secondary liver complications from the use of multiple drugs. She's cured from that now. This was her and her brother in Minnesota during the winter. This was the person who I indebted a lot. This is Professor William Krivit, who did the transplant. She came home, and this was her when she came home and sitting on the mother's lap. This was her really going very well and going back to school. And this is her and her family. This is her now. She survives. She's very well. She passed her diploma in culinary, and she's well. So I hope God will forgive me for all the lies and the maneuverings that I did. But my main aim was just to do this, to save a life for the family. Thank you very much for listening, and over to you, Prof. Teguh.
Thank you very much, Professor Bidi. What an incredible lecture. This is a very touching story, and then I really appreciate such a magnificent effort that you do to actually help the family. I think that's definitely go far beyond the call of duty to actually go to that extent to help a family. I can't imagine I myself as a doctor to be able to do that. So very big respect. My hat is off for you, sir. That's very incredible. All right, so I'm rather speechless actually after listening to that. Okay, we need to go to our second speaker. So Dr. Teguh Haryo Sasongko, he is our senior, our graduate also from the Faculty of Medicine, Public Health and Nursing, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Previously, it's not Faculty of Medicine, Public Health and Nursing, it's only Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Gadjah Mada. He's also my senior in Japan, so we studied together in Kobe University. When he came back from Kobe, I went to Kobe, so we never actually met in Japan. And yeah, but we are actually under the same big group, so we more or less understand the extent of our research, and we still met a lot after that. So he's currently associate professor in Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, or RCSI, School of Medicine, Perdana University, from October 2018. Before that, he was deputy. He is actually deputy director for Center for Research Excellence, Perdana University. And he was previously associate professor in School of Medicine, International Medical University, and so on. I think most of us already know about him. So since undergraduate, he is already one of the member of bioethics in our university, very active in studying about bioethics, teaching about bioethics. And even after graduation, he's still very concerned about that. So one of the topic which is very deep in his heart is about the ethics of many kind of disease, many kind of conditions. And today he will speak about this ethical dilemma in a matched unrelated bone marrow transplant from metachromatic leukodystrophy. So again, Dr. Teguh, the time is 30 minutes, but yeah, feel free if you think you need more time. Thank you. Please, time is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Rusdi. Thank you, Prof. Zabidi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much again for the Center of Bioethics and Medical Humanities in Gadjah Mada University for inviting me and Prof. Zabidi this time to discuss this issue about match unrelated bone marrow transplant. What I'm going to explain first is about how the disease came about, some molecular pathophysiology of the disease. Why then, for example, why then Prof. Zabidi found earlier that there is a degeneration of the white matter. White matter is really the macroscopic look of the brain and the central nervous system. If you do cross sections of the central nervous system, be it spinal cord or the brain, you will see macroscopically look at that, there is a gray matter and also white matter. So the gray matter consists of, this is the busy part where the electrical impulse are transmitted from one neuron to another. But the white matter, the whiteness there is really coming from the myelin sheath, yeah, that surrounds the axons. So this is where the cables, really, I use the word cables between one neuron to another exists. And the whiteness there comes from the myelin sheath. And this is really, the myelin sheath is really the central pathology of the metachromatic leukodystrophy. In fact, the name leukodystrophy comes from two words, leuko and dystrophy. Leuko is white. White, this comes from the whiteness of the myelin sheath, the whiteness of the axons. Dystrophy means imperfect or damaged. Yeah. So then leukodystrophy means degeneration of the whiteness. Yeah. So then what we the story actually starts from a substance called sulfatide. Sulfatide is very important protein that you can see in the brain, which is very important for the brain. There are various roles that sulfatide is playing, from the immune system, hemostasis, and then also other functions of the nervous system. Sulfatide, after it's carrying out its duty, must be broken down. Yeah, must be broken down back into here, the so-called galactocerebroside. Sulfatide itself was made from galactocerebroside, but after sulfatide is carrying out its duty here, it has to be broken down. It cannot be accumulated. So the breaking down of sulfatide, yeah, is done by an enzyme called aryl sulfatase A. Yeah, aryl sulfatase A. Now, if aryl sulfatase A is deficient, yeah, or absent, so then sulfatide cannot be broken down. So there will be accumulation of sulfatide in the brain. Yeah? Accumulation of sulfatide in the brain, that is the one that degrade or destroy the myelin sheath. So in other words, that is the problem why you see degeneration of the whiteness. The white matter is gone because the myelin is gone. Myelin is very important for the relay of impulse along the neuron, along the axons of the neurons. So if the myelin sheath is out or gone, then the relay of the impulse of the neuron system will be also degraded. So then we will see psychiatric problems, we will see motor neuron we will see motor problems, we will see all the psychiatric and all the nervous system problems. Now, sulfatide is broken down by an enzyme called aryl sulfatase. Aryl sulfatase is produced by a gene called ARSA gene. Now, mutation of ARSA gene is counting for most of the cases of MLD, metachromatic leukodystrophy. So this is how the disorder is actually passed on to offsprings. Yeah, it is passed on through autosomal recessive inheritance. In autosomal recessive inheritance, you have healthy father and healthy mother, but both of them carry the mutation in one of the genes. Normally, you have two genes. Yes? If one gene is mutated, the other genes will be able to compensate. But because both of them carry the mutation in one copy of the gene, their offspring will have, their kids will have the chance of inheriting both mutated copies. In here, you will see if both father and mother are carrier, so there is 25% chance that you will have the kid with affected disease. Yeah, 1 in 4 chance, and then 50% chance 2 out of 4 is carrier as well, and then another 25% rest is the healthy, completely healthy, not a carrier, and then not affected. So many people misunderstood this picture by thinking that if you have 4 children, then one of your children might get it, another 2 just carrier, and then another one will be completely healthy. That's not the way it is. This 1 in 4 or 2 in 4 or another 1 in 4, that happens in every birth. So for every birth, there's 25% chance of affected child. For every birth, there is 50% chance of carrier. For every birth, there is another 25% chance of being completely healthy. So it happened that for our family here, which is described by Prof. Zabidi, all of the children were affected. Okay, so the types that has been hinted by Prof. Zabidi just now, the case belongs to juvenile MLD. That's in the category 2 in terms of the severity. There is another one which is more severe. In fact, it's the most severe one, which is called late infantile MLD. This is really depending on the onset between 6 to 24 months old. That's what we call late infantile. The child will have trouble moving or walking, muscle cramps, and problems talking and learning. It will progress quickly and usually survive 5 to 10 years post-diagnosis. Well, for juvenile MLD, our case here, the symptoms are similar to late infantile, yeah? But the onset is much later, between 4 to 12 years old, and survive also much longer than the late infantile case, 10 to 20 years post-diagnosis. Well, for adult MLD, the onset is at teenage or adulthood, and often this is started in adult MLD, often started with psychiatric problems, yeah? Changes in personality and difficulty at work or school. And usually survive 20 to 30 years post-diagnosis. I would say there is no cure for now for MLD. Yeah? Most of the therapies are mostly in research pipeline. And then most of the care that can be given to the patients belong to the category of supportive care. Yeah? How they eat, how they do their activities as normal as possible, and so on. Most of the way of doing the therapy here is still in the research pipeline, such as cell therapy, yeah, replacing the damaged cells, microglia engraftment there, engrafting healthy microglia in the hope that microglia can express the healthy aryl sulfatase so that it can then wipe the sulfatate. And then another way is replacing the enzyme, replacing directly the aryl sulfatase that is missing through the enzyme replacement therapy, or gene therapy, replacing the mutated gene, yeah, replacing the mutated ARSA gene. Or can also be symptomatic. You see here, this is quite interesting, simvastatin. What do you use simvastatin for? Simvastatin for is to clear up fatty deposits, which is quite the problem in sulfatate accumulation in the brain. But what we are talking about here now is the hematopoietic, so-called hematopoietic stem cell therapy, or popularly known as bone marrow transplant, which is taking the content, the bone marrow, the content of the bone marrow and then transplant it to the patients in the hope that the new content, the new content which carries the healthy genes will express the aryl sulfatase, and then that can be carried by a cell. One of the cell macrophage can enter the brains. Then the macrophage carrying healthy ARSA gene will express the aryl sulfatase and then wipe the sulfatate in the brain. So that's the aim. This is the one that we are doing now. Many are still in the clinical trials at the moment, yet this is actually the so-called now standard therapy, standard treatment for MLD. Yeah. So when we have patients with MLD now, bone marrow transplantation is really the standard therapy. In bone marrow transplantation, what you do, you can see here, first is that the patient will receive high-dose chemotherapy first to clear up the damaged bone marrow that the patient has, that the patient originally has. Yeah, the patient will receive high-dose chemotherapy. This chemotherapy is really to kill his or her own stem cells and immune cells. After that, then the donor stem cells will be given to the patient through intravenous infusion. Then it will move through the blood vessels, and then these new stem cells, transplanted stem cells, will sit on the bone marrow, filling the bone marrow, the patient's bone marrow there, and then start producing new blood cells. Yeah? And these new blood cells will be the healthy ones, contain working copies of the ARSA genes. Yeah? And then they can express the new gene. Among the new blood cells are special cells called macrophages. These macrophages can travel to the brain. And then in the brain, the macrophage can express the aryl sulfatase and then clear up the sulfatate. That's the hope of it. So the complications for the problematics for bone marrow transplant is that you need to find HLA matched donor. This is because transplanting something outside of the patient's body will usually results in the patient's body rejecting that new thing. So in order to avoid this from happening, you need to find the new thing which is as similar as possible as the recipient's system. This is the system that we call HLA, or human leukocyte antigen. So if you have, the more match that you have, 6 out of 6 as expected, that will be the better. Yeah, the less specific you have, the less match you have, then the more risks you have to bear in terms of having the rejection from the patients. It can be coming from related or unrelated donors. Of course, if it is unrelated, if it is related, then the likelihood of success or the likelihood of match is of course higher. And then look here, cell replacement delayed by 12 to 24 months. That means after you do the transplantation, until you can expect that the new cells can really replace the old cells, you have to wait for 12 to 24 months. Yeah. So then this means that if the patients already show symptoms and deteriorating, progressively deteriorating, there is a relatively short timing window between diagnosis and the BMT treatment for any beneficial effect. So this is the complications that you can imagine what Prof. Zabidi and the doctors in the US was facing at that time. And also, this is a highly invasive procedure where you can expect to see initial deterioration of symptoms. I'm going into the ethical issues now. I'm going to present several ethical questions in here. First is the notion that this is an experimental treatment where we have to really weigh in terms of the risk and benefit. And then lack of decision-making capacity, because the subject that we are talking about are children. We cannot say they don't have autonomy, but they do have what we call growing autonomy. And then socioeconomic context, and then the current issue about having bone marrow market or compensatory model, and another issues. Let's have a look one by one. First is that risk versus benefit assessment. The problem here is that, as Professor Zabidi has also mentioned, is that this is an experimental treatment. This is in no way an established treatment which is already in guidelines of how we treat MLD. Being an experimental, so this is really experiments. There is a chance that it may do harm. There's also a chance that it may do good. Yeah. So then, at the onset, at the beginning, we really have to. The challenge for the doctors and also for the family later on is to really look at the possibility of harms and benefits, yeah, for the children mainly. Yeah. First is that because this is an experimental treatment, because it's a rare disease as well. So that being a rare disease, not many people know it, not many people study that. So then there is an absence of or scarcity of clear-cut evidence, which is clinically translatable, right? And then also there is an array of long-term complications. You see here in the table here, more than 70% of survivors have immunodeficiency. More than 50% of the survivors have renal dysfunction, and another long list of complications that the patients might have. And then survival rates 5 years post-transplantation ranges for this one, for the case that we have, matched unrelated, 25% to 50%. Yeah? So 25% or 50%. So it's mostly it's less than 50-50. Yeah? More than 60% of survivors reported at least one chronic health condition. And then more than 25% of the survivors reported severe or life-threatening complications. Now, when we see the risk and benefit, assessment, I'd like to draw a little bit on another example of case. Yeah, this is a patient, Charlie Gard is a baby in London. Yeah, in London. It suffers from a very devastating disease, similar to MLD, where the treatment is also experimental. Yeah. Charlie suffered from a very severe variant of that particular disease. Yeah. And then it has the baby, Charlie, has irreversible brain damage. No? Because of this, if Charlie really goes into the treatment, that would require full-fledged PICU, pediatric ICU treatment, until a clinical decision can be taken whether this has effect or no effect. At that time, the parents is really determined that they want to have this for their baby, for Charlie. Yeah? Clearly, there is a possibility of benefit, however small it is. The hospitals and the doctors who can perform the procedure is also willing and ready to perform the procedures. It is a very expensive treatment, really, but the parents managed to raise fund for their kids. They raised $1.6 million for their kids. So see, from the perspective of free market, yeah, from the perspective of free choice, there is not a problem. Possibility of benefits, willing and ready provider, and money is there. It's not their money, it's a donation from people around the world. But then because the child requires long-term PICU follow-up after that, which nobody knows until when the PICU need to sustain, then the ethicists in London cannot agree to this. Yeah? There is the question is, does the slim chance of any benefit outweigh the harms of continued treatment in the ICU? The perspective is not harm for the baby itself. The baby is located in London, and then it has to be he has to be transferred to Columbia University in New York. In New York, people know that PICU always run on full capacity. So that means if we put the baby on the PICU with full PICU support, so that means that will deprive access to other babies with probably better prognosis to have access to that facility. So this what prevents what really hold up the ethicists at London to allow this to allow the baby to be moved. This has created uproar of debates, yeah, within the public, whether this is actually allowed or no, whether it's too much for the ethicists in London to actually disallow the parents to bring the kids to London. But that's what happened. Now, next is the decision-making process. Decision-making process. We know that a child, being child, is not of legal age to provide consent. That's a common understanding. But that does not mean that they cannot provide consent. It does not mean that they doesn't have the capacity to say yes or no. Yeah, because as cognitive function matures with age, consciousness, awareness, and personhood also grows. That's why with children of certain age, yeah, especially teenagers, which does not reach the 17 or 18 legal age to give consent, we have to accommodate that using assent or sometimes co-consent, signed together in the same form. But again, always the problem is how to ensure assent or dissent in children. Yeah, when children are always under the protection, under the care, under the influence of adults that is surrounding them, and then how to manage conflicting wishes of parents and child, if they do have conflicting wishes. That's from the point of view of decision making. And then now from the socioeconomic context, we know that this procedure is one of the most expensive therapies in the world in terms of the money and healthcare resources. For bone marrow transplants, it's about 200,000 to 500K US dollar, yeah, per procedure. So that means there is an opportunity cost there. Resources spent on bone marrow transplant will not be available for other services. So there is a questions about equity of access to medical care and the degree to which the cost of care should influence decision making. Yeah. Should the treatment be given regardless of the cost for all cases and in all situations? Or should we have a minimum threshold? Yeah, minimum threshold below which the likelihood of short-term success and the probability of long-term disease-free survival require that treatment be denied. So should we have this threshold? So this is the socioeconomic context of the situations. Next is bone marrow market, or the so-called compensatory model. I'm going to give some background here. Every year there are so many patients that needs bone marrow transplant. MLD is not the only disease that require bone marrow transplants. We have many patients with blood cancers. They also require transplant. we need we have many other array of diseases that require bone marrow transplants. So we need to have ready donors. So the problem is that now the number of patients who need and the number of donors who can donate, let alone they are matched or unmatched, they are imbalanced. A lot more patients needing bone marrow than the donors that they are ready to donor and match, let alone match. Yeah. So there is that imbalance. So this creates then the questions whether it is allowed to have the so-called bone marrow market. This is the free market, the free choice style of how we call it, or the more softer tone of it is a compensatory model, in which we provide compensations to the donor. Yeah? This is like when we ask some donors to have blood transfusions, whether it is allowed to give compensations or not, and so on. There are pros and cons again for this idea. The idea that are against this bone marrow market or compensatory model say that this model will be an exploitation of donor or seller. Yeah. And then it will means also commodification of human body. Commodification means regarding human body as commodity, yeah, that can be sold at a price. And then having a compensation will also undermines altruistic motivations for donation. But there are also arguments that support the compensatory model. Yeah. Whatever it is, we have to say that whatever model that we have, given that there is a discrepancy in terms of the number of donors and the number of patients that need that, so actually if you ban completely the compensatory model, that will mean increase in preventable death. Death you can actually prevent will increase because of that. So that means it will deprive access to something which otherwise be available, right? So and we all have the ethical duties to actually prevent deaths, right? And then second is that this will put limit on free choice, which would serve as best option to many. This is the best option that we have. So why would you have to limit that, right? And then next is something which sounds more cynical. Is this, there are already those who profit from voluntary transplantation. Even if it is voluntary, yeah, they still have to pay the doctors. They still have to. Insurance companies will get profits from that. Hospitals, equipment suppliers, and so on. Then why would you restrict profit from the donor themselves, from whom all the profit has come, right? So these are the debates surrounding the bone marrow market and compensatory model. There are some other issues here that I can present. One is that the influence of online information. Yeah, on one side, the availability of online information about experimental treatments can empower patients, yeah, but may also fail to alert patients to the limits or risks of experimental treatments. Yeah, so online information is freely available to anyone now, easily accessible. You just have to look at the right place on the internet, then you get the information that you need. In one side, these informations will empower the patients, but on the other side, it may also fail to alert patients about the limits or risks of the treatments. And then second is about ensuring healthcare professionals to act responsibly, that any treatment offered to a patient are in their best interest and not driven by other incentive. Yeah. Next is unequal access. Of course, not everyone can afford this kind of experiments. Not everyone can raise $1.6 million for their child. Yeah. Not everyone's have access really to this treatment. This is right, and availability can vary between and even within countries. And then there's also negative impacts on knowledge generation. Yeah. If this is done in the context of clinical trials, so the clinical trials will be properly, the data from the clinical trials will be properly collected and then published. So people will have access on that. But if it is done not in the context of clinical trials, yet this is still experimental treatment, useful information usually not published. Yeah, useful information usually not published. So others does not have access to the information. Yeah. All right. So I guess that's what I can describe further to what Prof. Zabidi have shared with all of us, and I hope we can have a good discussion. Thank you, Dr. Rusdi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. A very comprehensive and interesting presentations explaining the basic pathophysiology of the disease, and then some ethical issues that arise from this experimental treatment from the risk-benefit analysis and decision-making process, the socioeconomic impact, about opportunity cost, and then also about bone marrow market and compensatory model, a very comprehensive review. All right. Okay, so now we go to the discussion. So if any of you have questions, you can do with two options. You can type in the chat column, or you can directly ask questions. You can raise your hand or speak directly. Is there anyone who has already have some burning questions that you want to ask to our two wonderful speakers? All right, while waiting for that, I think I have a few questions to each of you. First, for Professor Zabidi. So there is something going on. I'm still thinking, how is actually the rule in Malaysia regarding of sending samples to foreign country? It is a sensitive issue in our country, Indonesia, especially after some issue with some previous ministers of health about influenza virus, I think bird flu virus that we sent to the outside of the country. So it's a very significant issue, and now we have some very strict rule regarding MTA, material transfer agreement. So I wonder how is actually the regulation in Malaysia regarding that, because listening from you seems like it's also a big issue, because in our country we need 2 or 3 months to apply for that. It's not always agreed upon, and that's it takes time and so on. And my second question also to you is that how is actually the experimental treatment outside of clinical trials regulated in Malaysia? So because in Indonesia it's also the clinical trial part is clear, right? So there are rules regarding that. But for things outside of clinical trials, we don't have clear rules of how actually we should do that. So that's my two questions. And then after that, to Dr. Teguh, I have questions regarding or maybe let's give an opportunity for Professor Zabidi first.
Yes, thank you for the question. Basically, the rules for sending specimen has been there for a number of years now. And it was for that reason why Malaysia and our partner Australia had very, very strict rules. Yeah. So I had to send the specimens to Adelaide Women and Children's Hospital. So they have very strict rules. You must give them 2 or 3 month notice, and you must give them very clear reason why you're sending it, and you must give them reasons whether the lab in your country or in neighboring countries are not able to do these tests. So basically, yeah, those are the rules, very well established rules, but we don't have the luxury of time. We did not have the luxury of time, and that's why we had to break the rules. And that breaking of rules basically was very, very unethical, and it could have cost me my
Your career,
when you say my life, my career, basically.
Yeah,
because I was stopped at the Adelaide airport just for that reason, because I did not give them. But I had to do it because I was given a very short notice to travel to Australia, and I thought I would take the opportunity to bring that specimen. It was very short notice. I was given 1 week to travel to Adelaide to work things out with my Adelaide partner. So I know it is very unethical. And that is it. So it's as regards experimental treatment. Yes, the rules for experimental treatment in any countries are the same. But wouldn't you say that COVID vaccination is experimental as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, in some unusual circumstances, we really have to do our best to make sure that things are done. I agree with you totally, Dr. Rusdi. What I had to do was totally unethical, but under the circumstances, I think that I can justify being unethical under those circumstances, because I cannot face the fact that all 5 will die, and they'll be watching their brothers and sisters dying in their own homes. I cannot face that fact.
Thank you, Prof. Zabidi. I do think it's what you are doing is actually ethical. I agree. I completely agree with you that in certain situations, life take precedence above all else, right? But we have other experts here about ethics. Let's ask them what they think, whether they think it's ethical or not. I think we have Mas Azid. Are you there? I don't see him. All right, after this. I will go to Mas Azid to ask his comment, but our expert on ethical issues. what is he thinking about this? But first, I think we have questions from audience, from Pak Stanislaus Joko Mulyo. Monggo, silakan. Kalau pertanyaan, monggo silakan.
Hello, Prof. Zabidi.
Hello, how are you, sir?
Nice to meet you in Zoom, Prof. Zabidi.
Yeah.
How are you, Prof?
I'm fine. Joko was our NMETS specialist in USM, yeah.
Yeah. I thought he's Indonesian, so Joko is Indonesian name.
Yeah. I'm in Karawaci now. I'm Banten.
Okay.
I'm pediatrician now.
Okay,
Prof. Zabidi is my good teacher, good professor. Prof, it's very nice to heard about your presentation, Prof. My question is, Prof, how we as a pediatrician to get awareness for take the metachromatic disorder in children, Prof? What kind of symptom? The first symptom that we should think that, oh, this is metachromatic disorder before we let for diagnosis, Prof.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. So as mentioned by Prof. Teguh earlier on, there are 3 categories of metachromatic leukodystrophy. Either you see them from birth, or you see them juvenile onset or adult onset. But the broad rule of how to recognize it is a regression, developmental regression. The child will develop to a certain stage and then regresses, loses some of the developmental milestones. That is an indicator for regressive illness. Yeah,
If the symptom of regression, then we should think about the metachromatic.
We should think of not just metachromatic leukodystrophy. We should think of all the causes of regressive neurological disorder, and MLD is one of them. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Always safe and healthy, Prof.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from the chat, Prof. Zabidi. This is basically directed for you, from Dr. Azid, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's asking, so if lying to the patients is allowed in your case, so what is actually the boundaries for that?
I did not lie to my patient. I lied to the custom officer.
So how is the boundaries of lying for your patients?
In my case,
elaborate more. He is live now.
Yeah. In my case, I did not lie to the patient. I told the patient everything that I had to say, including the fact that the treatment was not available. So in that case, I wasn't lying to them, but I lied to various other people. I lied to the custom officer. and I lied to many other people to get my things through. So I wasn't lying to the patient. Yeah.
Dr. Isaac, maybe you can elaborate more. What do you mean by boundaries in your question?
Yeah, actually, that's what I mean, bro. If lying for these patients is ethically justified, you are lying to other authorities in Australia and also from fundings, several fundings. If lying for your patients is ethically justified for this kind of case, then what will be the boundaries for other patients, for other conditions? Then how can we make boundaries for this kind of lying, for this kind of white lying?
All right, I love discussion.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't have a straight answer to this. I really don't have a straight answer to this. But in my mind, I cannot face the fact that all of them will die. That's one. So maybe you can say that just because of that, you justify lying. That is for discussion. But I cannot face the fact that all of them will die. Not only will die, but they will die in their own home, witnessed by the normal children. Okay, so I really can't bear that thought, of them, of having that, So basically, that was the reason why I had to do what I did, and again, you're talking about the boundaries. I will not lie to anybody else. I will not. I will still have in my mind that do not lie. But under unusual circumstances, then maybe it's justified to do that. Yeah.
Any comment on that, Mas Azid?
Yeah, hearing this kind of stories, it's always remind us to a person like Robin Hood in the West, or Sunan Kalijogo in the Javanese stories. With Sunan Kalijogo, it's not story, but it's a fact that people who have certain abilities, mereka membela orang yang lemah begitu ya, dengan kemudian menjarah atau mengambil dari orang-orang yang kuat.
Yeah.
Yeah, this kind of stories is always interesting, but this kind of stories is always become an ethical question, whether this kind of actions is really ethically justified. If it is justified, then we have to justify Robin Hood. We have to justify the other people who also done the same thing for the people who are weak, people who cannot defend themselves. But when I'm asking about boundaries, then is it apakah hanya pada pasien ini kemudian kita harus lakukan? Apakah kondisi ketika pasien harus meninggal di rumah dengan beberapa orang keluarganya itu hanya terjadi pada pasien ini? Karena because we face this when we have COVID, really bad COVID pandemic in last July this year. I lost my father-in-law also due to this COVID, and I witnessed some of my families also, they lost their loved ones because they cannot afford to go to hospital. So then what will become the boundaries? Then if we are talking about the health professionals, then what are the boundaries? What are the professional ethical responsibilities for us to when we are facing this kind of case?
It's a very good comment, But I think in my mind, boundaries shouldn't be boundaries should be flexible and appropriate to the circumstances. It should not be just a straight line dividing one to the other. In the unusual circumstances, you want to make them. You may want to make the boundary flexible. Yeah.
Yeah. So case by case basis, case by case analysis, we cannot make just the general justifications. All right. Maybe you have comment on that, Dr. Teguh?
Yeah. If we look at the case of Robin Hood there, the boundary, if we see this, and also we see what Zabidi has experienced, is the intention really, right? The intention there. the intention justifies the act at that point in time. Well, our worries with Robin Hood is that Robin Hood destroys the social order. Robin Hood destroys the social order. That's why then comes where is the boundary. But then the questions next is that why would Robin Hood have to do that? That's because the social system is not capable of doing what Robin Hood is doing, isn't it? Right. So this is again going back to the community, to the society. How we why would that kind of questions prevail? First of all, that will be my comment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Teguh. This will go in line with the next questions from Dr. Wika. So I think I will go from Dr. Teguh first as a continuation from what he just said. So Dr. Wika is asking whether what Professor Zabidi has done is actually an example of ethically justified violation of law. And regarding that, how do you suggest we reconcile this prioritizing between beneficent principles and the justice principle? Or maybe Dr. Wika want to ask directly?
Maybe I'm a bit hopping on Dr. Aziz's previous question.
Oh,
yeah, but like I
will respond to that question, please.
Yeah, I'm really interested with the question from Dr. Aziz and also the response from Professor Zabidi and Prof. Teguh. But so I'm actually personally torn about my understanding is there is this tension between wanting to prioritizing the beneficence for the patients, wanting for the best for making effort for the patients, but then on the other side, there is the consequences. There is other thing, the justice principle about if you do this for one patient, and how about the other patient? If you decided to go against the regulation or the law, but then you know that the regulation or the law is there for a reason, for a broader society's reason, like maybe the nation's sovereignty, protection of material transfer or material sending, like, but then how do you suggest we reconcile that? Like, in fact, it is there is a tension between those two. Like, so yeah, I'm just hopping onto that conversation.
Yeah. Okay, can I just take that question? I think as long as laws are not made by God, laws can be broken with justification. So, except it's a law by God. Okay, so that's my belief. You know, we as long as laws are human made, you should find and give strong justifications for breaking the law.
Dr. Teguh, your comment?
I remember giving one in one of my lecture about ethics to my students. I asked the students, do you think all laws that you know are moral? So that's the question. And then and then I start asking, how about law about prostitution? They allow prostitution. Is it a moral kind of law, right? So this is the thing. We know that whatever law that we have, we should have moral basis on that. But to say that more law is moral is probably well. Wait a minute. As Prof. Zabidi has said also, this is made. This law is made by humans, and humans are with having all the vested interests that we have are so limited in really ensuring moral. Many years ago, Dr. Aziz, I remember, is asking these questions about that we need to have moral tests on every law that we pass, actually, whether the law that we pass actually fulfill the moral conduct that we have. Again, this could be the case of Robin Hood, but that's it. That's what I think.
Thank you, Dr. Teguh. Any rebuttal, maybe, Dr. Wika? Or
no, this is not a rebuttal. In fact, I was inspired. Actually, I'm actually trying to seek confirmation that if I were to use this example when I'm teaching the students, that there is a case of where violation of law is ethically justified. For example, like this case, like so you do agree with that because there is a moral reasoning, there is a moral justification behind that. But then the next question would be, how do we reconcile the fact that we are actually breaking the law because it stays there, the law is being violated? So do we stop just doing this on the basis of saving our patient, providing the benefit? But then what do we do with the justice principles? Like, don't we need to suggest that the law or regulation somehow be changed so that we don't have to continuously violate the law for another cases, similar cases that happen? Like, how do we then follow up on the other principles that we need to also uphold? Maybe for now, for this case, that is not the prioritization, but then do we just leave it like that, or is there any other steps that we need to follow up?
Right. Short comment on that, Prof. Zabidi.
I think basically we have laws and we should follow the laws. All right. And when there are exceptions to the law, there should be a group to discuss these exceptions. Okay. Right. So I think in my case, I did not have the chance to discuss this in a group, but I think if the laws are there, we should find a group to discuss the exceptions to the law. And that exception was given by the Chief Secretary of the Health Ministry. He said to me that as long as the parents are working in the government, the law allows you to find treatment wherever they are. So that, in my mind, was an authoritative green flag justification for me to break the law.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we need to go.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Prof.
That issue, right? Do you have other questions? I think from Dr. Amalia, please, Dr. Amalia.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Rusdi. Nice to see you. Lama tak jumpa.
Ya, lama tak jumpa.
Ini belum
we cannot see you, by the way.
Bagaimana? Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. I'm using two devices. I'm a bit confused. Okay. Now you can see my face. Okay. Yeah, because my microphone is broken, so I'm using my mobile for the microphone. I'm very interested in Aziz's question. It's an excellent question, I think, and it makes me think also. I think indeed the issue of lying is always interesting. I don't think there are any clear boundaries in such cases. And I think each person will have their own boundaries, I would say, which is their own ethical or moral value, and also their capacity to make an ethical decision. So, like Pak Zabidi had said, there is no clear boundary here. So in this case, I think Pak Zabidi has made an ethical choice or decision to do what he has done. And I think maybe each of us have our own ethical judgment of whether or not it is considered good or not. In this case, I would say it's a good ethical decision. I don't know about Prof. Zabidi, if you regret any. I don't think so. I hope not. But it's always okay. I mean, ethical decisions are up to their individuals to make, and they can regret or not regret in the future, and that's they are the one who know what actually comes out of their decision. And talking about legal and illegal, I like to quote from Edward Snowden that good or bad, and bad or right or wrong is a very different standard from legal and illegal. So I think that often crashes. I think the interesting ethical issues is mostly I think about contradiction with the law. So it's always interesting to because Prof. Zabidi has lied in terms of breaking the rules, the law, not lying of other intention. So he has lied and for the patient in terms of breaking the law. That I don't know, but it might not cause any big harm. In this case, I don't know, because I didn't make the law of sending specimens and so on. Yeah, I think I would like to just add that.
Can I just pick up on that point? Yes,
Yeah.
it was at the customs in Adelaide that I was stopped. All right. I did offer the custom officer to open my what is that?
Toiletry bag.
The toiletry bag. I offered that. Shall I open it for you? He said, no, don't worry. Don't. If it's toiletry bag, don't open it. I offered to him to open it. And the specimen was inside there. He didn't want to take it up. So it's not my fault. It's not my fault. I wasn't lying. I was just telling half truths.
Yes, yes, of course.
Yeah.
I do very much agree on your decision, Pak Profesor, and it's incredible what many things have happened to you, and it's kita bilang seperti mujizat ya.
That's right.
Yeah.
Actually, sending samples to foreign countries and back is something that we, when as PhD students, do many times, right, Dr. Teguh?
Right. Okay.
And no one talk about that. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Amalia. And okay, we still have some time. So I want to invite the people here. So we have some other experts on bioethics here that I think maybe have some interesting ideas or opinion about the topic we have just discussed. First of all, Prof. Narto ada nggak ya? Or Prof. Yati, nggak ada ya? Nggak ada.
Kelihatan.
Maybe Romo, do you have any opinion, Romokus? All right, well, waiting for that, I will go to Dr. Teguh. You mentioned before about this right to try for Charlie Gard that you mentioned before, because there is no other options available for him. So this is a statement which sometimes used a lot in the case like this. So the no other options argument, which is, I remember I did, for example, I'm in the stem cell team. A few months ago, I did treat some patient with stem cells, an experimental treatment in COVID, which is not yet at the time approved in the country for that treatment, for the same argument. There are no other options, the patient in critical condition and so on, and the result is good. So is it a good argument that there is no other options to the patient so that we can try this experimental treatment? Because some other people says that there is not ethical argument to say that there's no other option is actually an argument.
Well, there is a debate about that, really. This is also what they call the so-called last hope notion.
Yes.
Yeah, when there's a last hope notion. Last hope does not mean no hope. It's when you say last hope, the first thought will be like it's just a garbage can. You just throw everything there. That means actually no hope for that, but just do it for the sake of doing it. If you do that, it's of course unethical, because there will be a risk in doing that. You are wasting resources. You are doing more harms than it should be to the patients and so on. But as long as there is hope, I think the keywords is there. I think if as long as there is a hope, and then there is a proper risk and benefit assessment there, then the procedure should be done. But it cannot be resorting into like a garbage can. You just do it for the sake of doing it, because the patients will die anyway, and this is the last thing that you can do. But actually, there's no hope on that. I don't think that is ethical.
Yeah, the last hope notion. That's the term. That's the term. All right. Any comment on that, Dr. Prof. Zabidi?
Dr. Teguh said in a very nice manner already. Yeah.
All right. I think Aditan from Malaysia, Dr. Aditan wants to add some things about the diagnostic of MLD cases as asked by Dr. Jogo earlier. Please.
Dr. Adi, apa kabar, Dr. Adi?
Yeah, bye. Assalamualaikum. Prof. Zabidi is my mentor. Okay, so we come from the same guru. We come from the same master. Okay. Anyway, from the clinical point of view, tadi Prof. Zabidi has mentioned, all right, that regression is one of the major clinical signs and symptoms. Tapi yang what I would like to add in is that now there are available testing, especially like newborn screening for LSD. As MLD is being categorized in the LSD disorders. So this can be screened through newborn screening. But anyway, come to talk about MLD, by international standard, we can read in in journals. It is been what you call reported as 1 in 80,000 live birth. So it's a very rare disorders. Okay, but some authors say that it's 1 in 40,000 and so on. But for the group in Australia, they have come out with automated newborn screening method, whereby they do what you call numbers of LSD, lysosomal storage disorders, as a group, and they screen through by just using one sample. And with that total, it has brought down the incidence of LSD, not MLD, yeah? Like so in LSD to 1 in 1,500. That is 1 in 1,500, and that's where it makes it worthwhile to be screened. Okay. Apart from that, Dr. Teguh, I also know Dr. Teguh. Prof. Teguh has said just now, about the what you call transplant period. Okay, the BMT. The period for treatment for most LSD or these disorders are very, very small. Okay, so the earlier we detect, the better the prognosis or the treatment. So if we have got an index case, then we should do what you call a screening for all the siblings if possible, because they might be, as earlier mentioned in the lecture, there are 3 groups: the late infantile, juvenile, and adult. So we don't know which group, they might be in what you call, the patient might be in which group. Okay. So, but then it's going to be a long story. I've learned all this in Adelaide. It's a long story. The treatment will be different, when to decide for the treatment and so on. Actually, that is what I've done in my study in what you call in Adelaide. Okay, we go into the enzyme level, the ARSA enzyme level. Okay, so I think that's it. If that's an index case, it's much easier. So please, what do you call, do a screening for all the siblings. Okay, if there's no index case, then the only way to go about it is to newborn screening for LSD. All right, maybe Dr. Zabidi would like to add in. I think that's all from me. Actually, I wasn't practicing this MLD. I was doing the other field for quite some time. Okay, thank you very much. I hope that would help.
Yeah, Dr. Adi did his PhD on this subject.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Adi, for your excellent insight on the topic. All right. So again, I invite other seniors to ask some questions. We still have Romakus, Prof. Sofia Mubarika, and the others about these topics.
I have something.
Okay, Dr. Teguh, please.
I have some. Dr. Adi mentioned about index case. It triggers something on me, which is also on probably something ethical as well to ponder. Let's say now we have index case. We found the index case and we screened the whole family, and we found some or probably all the children bring the mutation. We know that the children will at one time start showing symptoms. But at that point in time, they haven't showed any symptoms. They are completely healthy. What to do with this? We know if we start the procedure right now there, the condition will start to deteriorate because of the procedure itself. You see, bone marrow will require you to do chemotherapy to flush the original bone marrow and then fill in with the new bone marrow. That will be devastating physically, mentally, emotionally to the patients as well as the family. This is a question to me.
Yeah, and yeah, maybe Prof. Zabidi can answer that, because I think this is the question that you should answer yourself actually, because you're bringing the presentation
Yeah,
about.
that was exactly what we had to do. We had to treat. We had to give the bone marrow transplant before they exhibit any symptoms, because
Yeah.
once a kid exhibit symptoms of MLD, it's too late. The white matter will be damaged, and the damage takes it happens very quickly. So what we had to do then was we transplanted the girl when she was 7. When she was 7, we did it when she was asymptomatic, but we knew that she had the disease. It's a matter of time before she will exhibit the disease. By the time she exhibited, it would be too late. So that's what we had to do. Yeah.
So if let's say index case have juvenile type, is it guaranteed that the other one will have juvenile type, or is it possible they will have adult onset?
It's supposed to be 1 in 4, isn't it? Autosomal recessive. In the same family, if you have one child, the likelihood of another child having the same disease is 25%, as Dr. Go was saying. So because they come from the same progeny, you see, both parents are carrying the defective genes. So in the same family, it's supposed to be 1 in 4, but fate has it that in this particular family, all five of them have it, which is very unusual.
What I mean, the onset, because there are 3 types, right? There are the infantile onset and juvenile and adult onset. So I wonder whether all the family will always have juvenile onset. In that case, then, because if it is adult onset, there are still maybe decades until the patients will have symptoms. That's the discussion will be more complicated when we start treatment.
Yeah, it looks as though all of them developed at the same time. So all of them had juvenile onset in this particular case, but I'm not sure whether there are other cases where one child developed early and the other one developed at the adulthood. That I'm not too sure. I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, but in this particular case, all of them, as soon as they reach 9, they develop the symptoms and signs.
Any comment?
Yeah, I would say so. I would agree to Prof. Zabidi. I think this is most of the time the problems for genetic disorders. You know you have the real cause that will result in the disease, but you don't know what really make the disease vary from one another in terms of the severity. But this comes from the same family, and most likely the factors that make the severity vary will come from genetic factors, which also runs in the same family. I would think most likely if one is in juvenile, then the next ones will also be in the juvenile stage as well.
All right. Okay. Again, maybe we are almost finished. So I invite, is there any other questions from the forum? Questions, comments, or any experience sharing or something like that? All right. If not, oh, wait a second. There is someone writing in the chat. Okay, so who is typing this question? I think Mas Azid. All right, Mas Azid, I think you can just directly speak. Because it's a long thing. I don't want to read it.
There is one from
Dr. Galu. Maybe
Dr. Galu.
There is also from Dr. Galu. All right. So let me see. Okay, from Dr. Galu. Interesting. The question is, how do you face it if you already detect that risk and the result is not as expected? The result is bad. So it must be so hard to accept it as a clinician and as a researcher also, after deciding to take the risk to treat the patient with this experimental treatment. How do you cope with that?
Yeah, I must admit, when I heard that the child number 4, who also had the same disease and passed away in Minnesota, I must say I could not. I just broke down. I basically said, okay, that's it. I fear for number 5. So basically, my wife, my family were all affected by that, because I was just devastated. Basically, I was hoping that this experimental therapy works, but it didn't for number 4. So In fact, I basically accompanied the body to the grave and personally went into the grave and actually buried the child, just to show that I'm remorseful. I'm remorseful.
All right. This last question from Dr. Azid. I think you can just doing it live, Dr. Azid, please.
Yeah, I think this is more of a comment maybe, and not other questions. But thank you very much, Prof. Zabidi and Master Go. This is a very for the very heavy afternoon, because wait, your materials, your talks, it's really inspiring. It's really well. Hearing your stories again, because I've read the book. This is the continuations of your first book, I think, Prof. Zabidi, of the forget the P. The
perilous genes.
Yeah. And when hearing your stories, and then when I try to rationalize your decisions about you take the ethical decisions to lie briefly, because we all know how the Australian custom they will mereka akan memperlakukan Prof. Zabidi seperti apa begitu ketika when you memasukkan secara illegal begitu material, because Australia is really well known with that. Itu mungkin bagi orang yang tidak mengenal Prof. Zabidi akan mendengar kisah ini, kalau bahasa anak muda di Indonesia itu sekarang, Mbak, ini dokter yang lebay begitu. Karena masuk sampai segitunya. How you can translate this to English? But I hope you get the message correctly. But for those who know you, bagi orang yang mengenal Prof. Zabidi like me, even for a short time, we do know that this is coming from your heart. And when I try to evaluate, rationalize this with using the 4 principles of Beecherman's redress, for example, that we have respect for autonomy, the conventional, I cannot say this obsolete, but this is the conventional principalism ethic. I cannot find the justification for that, because it will always in contrast between the doing good, the beneficence, with the justice. Because I believe you don't do this for all of your patients. You did for the certain patient that you know. Maybe you do quite hard work we believe for all your patients, but maybe not like this one. Analyzing this, I believe that virtue ethics will be the most suitable for the ethical justification when we are talking about this, because virtue ethics is always about choice in between extremes. And I believe, and because I know you personally, that your virtue you are the example of a good person. So this is the examples of a really virtuous person, the most ethical person I know in this time of my living. So thank you very much for the lesson, for this afternoon lesson, Prof. Zabidi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Azid. I think Dr. Aditan answered some of my question before in the chat. He's saying that if the index case is late infantile, then the sibling of the affected will also be late infantile, except if there are other mutations happening, which is possible in genetics, but of course quite unlikely, but it's possible. But the most likely the family will have the same types of MLD with the index case. All right, so I think this last question from Dr. Amalia, and after that I will ask some closing statement from Prof. Zabidi and Dr. Teguh. So she is asking about the impact of your case that you have already mentioned. I think it gets a lot of media attention, like you mentioned before, how it affects medical community, about the debate going on there, and maybe it affect any changes in law or regulation or the healthcare system in your country?
Yeah, in this case, this bone marrow transplant was done when the kid was 7 years old. She's now 31 years old. But along the time period, my students are well aware of this story. I have not made it known to the other members of the community in terms of the health ministry and so on, but I'm sure that the treatment for metachromatic leukodystrophy has changed now. There are more and more people who are giving a bone marrow transplant locally now in Malaysia for the same disease, for the same metachromatic leukodystrophy. So I think I did not publish this because scientific publication may end up being read by me alone and the scientific community. But I decided to put it into a book so that the public will benefit from the experiences I had to go through. Clearly, they will have their own views on what I did and how ethical or unethical I behave. But I think it will remain in the memory of the public in the form of not a scientific paper, but a book. So I hope it will remain as such, until forever, as an example of how we can break things, how we can do things if I put our intention in the right place, how it is possible for us to do things, and how unexpected things will happen to you. How did I expect that man from Washington Embassy to call me? It was God who changed his mind to call me. I didn't ask him. I was helpless. I was saying I cannot do anything now, but suddenly I received a phone call. How was it that in February of the same year, I was called to Baylor's College, and then in November of the same year, the child was sent to Minnesota, and I can accompany them and hand over the case to William Privet myself. So I think if you put your heart and mind in a good place, unexpected things will happen to you. Believe me, or whether you are whatever religion you are, if you put your heart and mind in the right place, wanting to do good to people, I can assure you unexpected things will happen to you. That would be my closing statement. But yeah, that would be my closing statement. Dr. Rusdi, over to you.
Sorry, I'm still in mute. Okay, thank you very much for that inspiring closing statement, Prof. Zabidi. Dr. Teguh, do you have any closing statement? You are still muted also, Dr. Teguh.
Sorry, I don't have closing statement. Prof. Zabidi has wrapped it up very beautifully.
All right. Thank you very much. So
I concur with that.
Yeah, how to pass that as a closing statement, but I have a duty as a moderator to actually close. So I'll try my best. So there is no topic about what Prof. Zabidi already said as a closing. So I will just make a summary. We have already discussed a very interesting case. Like I mentioned to you when Prof. Zabidi finished the presentation, I'm totally speechless. It's something that when you study in the medical school, you study about treating the patients. So you study about idealism of being a doctor. So this may be the most ideal thing that you can think about. So something that as an ideal doctor, when the graduate students, you imagine you will be as a doctor in the future. And then life happens. You go to the clinic, you find your patients, you deal with insurance and so on. And this idealism starts to fade. And then you finally just become a regular doctor with all these dreams in behind, and you don't even remember about it anymore. So this is a really inspiring talk. And we learned a lot about this. But I think one of the most important thing is that we learn a lot that we need to be flexible. I think that's a very important point that Prof. Zabidi already mentioned. We need to be flexible. And maybe the second point is that we need to discuss in group. So if we are confused about something, yes, being flexible is good, but maybe better to discuss with somebody else who are more expert about that, discuss in groups so that we can be flexible, but still being safe also in being flexible. All right, so I think that's my closing statement. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, Dr. Teguh, for a very excellent talk and discussion. Thank you very much for Dr. Azib, Dr. Wika, and all other, Dr. Amalia, and all other audience already asked questions. I close this meeting. Thank you very much for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Prof. Teguh and Prof. Zabidi for the inspiring talk.
Bu Asti.
Bu Asti.
Sehat Bu.
Hai.
Bu Asti.
Sehat, alhamdulillah.
Oi, Bu Asti.
Teguh, Prof. Zabidi.
Kabar, Bu?
Alhamdulillah sehat semua ya.
Alhamdulillah.
Sukses,
Pasti
hebat.
pasti di kebunnya
Prof.
yang lebat itu pasti.